Am I ever inspired by current events, things that are happening in society? Absolutely. Absolutely all the time. In fact, Taken, next year's book, in large part grows out of many of the news stories you'll see about what's going on along about the U.S.-Mexican border, with the cartels taking over, mass graves, killings, that interface, the abduction of innocent people by kidnappers who are professional kidnappers, whose sole job is to kidnap groups of helpless and innocent people and then ransom them. And when the ransoms run out or are not paid, then they're all murdered and buried out in the desert. So living in Southern California, we see that a lot in the news, and it gave me some instances that I wanted to follow up and develop into a story, and that's going to be the backdrop for next year's Taken.
Yes.
By the way, I will say that the word Taken has many levels within this book. There's a reason that word Taken is the title, and there are a variety of people taken in a variety of ways. And I'll just give you the big hint. You know, Elvis Cole finds himself taken, and then that's one half of the book. The other half of the book is Joe Pike gets him back.
So you're sitting working in your office, and you get a phone call from Moses, and he says, Robert, there's going to be a hell of a flood, and the ark's leaving soon, and we only have room for one of your books. Sorry, but one of your books. Which book would you like me to take with me?
My family photo album. Aren't I amazing? Yes.
You talked about the heavy lifting of excavation of a serious character over time. Do you feel that in delving deep into Elvis Cole that over time he's become a little less of a flippant character, a little less of a wisecracking character, more serious?
Yeah, he's asking about the fact that, and I acknowledge it, Elvis is there are fewer one-liners in my later books than in my earlier books. Now Elvis is still funny, but he's not as flip as he was in the first 4 or 5 books. Part of that is because of you digging deeper, but part of it is also it also comes with the fact that I think once I expanded the books, meaning and by expand that goes back to L.A. Requiem, which suddenly was a much physically it's a larger book. There's the subject matter since then has always been a little bit more serious, and then therefore, for example, like Last Detective, Ben Schneer's kidnapped, so you have a missing child who's kidnapped. It's tough to sit there and write a character being flippant when there's a child buried in a box somewhere. So part of that is that kind of choice, where you think, Jesus, do I step over the line and suddenly he becomes offensive and unappealing because he's inappropriate in that way. There's actually almost a duplication line in this new book, Taken, because in the first few chapters, before we know really what's going on with the story, when we're seeing Elvis is very much the old Elvis. He's very much that kind of cynical, flippant sense of humor. But then suddenly things change, and that has to go out the window because it just doesn't fit with what's really going on. What do I read? Mostly it's a weird thing with me. I used to be a voracious reader of fiction, and I still read fiction. I try to keep up with. I have my favorites who I read. But somewhere along the way I lost the ability to relax when reading fiction, and so most of my reading is nonfiction, which I can relax with nonfiction. Because I don't read during the day. I read only by the time my work is finished. Then I have a little bit of time before when I'm nodding out. I want to read. The problem with fiction for me is I realize that it's still work. Like if I'm reading one of Gregg's terrific books, then what I'm doing when I'm reading it, I'm not just enjoying the book the way a casual reader would do it, because he's so good at the real tight, like really tight plotting and really shifting elements and keeping him racing ahead. When I read, I'm trying to figure out how he did it. So there's always that part of my brain that's working, so I can't relax. So it's self-defense. I just I read other stuff.
Do you find that with movies too, that you're breaking them apart and how the story functions and how it's structured, or is that even easier?
It's an easier step back for me because I no longer work. You know, I'm not a movie writer. I don't write TV anymore. So it's actually easier to let go. And now I can more. I can dissolve into it and appreciate it more, I think.
Are there some books you can't read when you're writing? Like, do you have a hard time reading a thriller or mystery when you're doing your own writing? Or?
Some. Yeah, there's actually, it's usually people with really strong voices. For example, I cannot read Elmore Leonard while I'm writing because I start to sound like Elmore Leonard. I can't read Ray Bradbury. And I love his work. I've been reading it since I was a kid. But I can't read it because when I write the next night, it'll sound like Ray Bradbury. So yeah, I have to stay away from them.
You mentioned about how obviously you're not writing for TV or movies anymore. Is there any scenario under which you would return to work for movies or TV?
No, negative.
Even if you were given full creative control?
It doesn't exist for a writer. It doesn't exist for anybody. But no, the answer is no.
Yes?
Is it your history in writing for television that lends to not wanting to sell the rights to the characters? Or, I mean, I can come up with reasons why not to sell these two characters to the movies,
right.
But is that part of it?
She asked, if you didn't hear, is it my personal work history with television that leads to my being unwilling to sell the film rights to Elvis and Joe? I guess maybe in part. I mean, because I know, like you said, if they give you full control, well, here's the fact of the matter is I don't think there's anyone, even the most humongous names you know of, who has full and complete control. Because there's always the guy who's writing the checks. You know, you can be Steven Spielberg, but there's a studio somewhere, and you have to justify spending all that money. There's still a budget. I mean, and then a film production is a living thing, which means you can plan your butt off. But when you're finally on the stage and you got a crew and you got living human being actors, and it's supposed to be a bright and sunny day, and there are clouds and it's raining and you got to rewrite scenes and stuff. You know, it's a fluid, living thing. Now that's part of the joy of doing it. But there are other parts of that fluid, living mess that aren't as fun for me. So ultimately I didn't enjoy the collaboration. Now, Elvis and Joe, I'm a big believer, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You all like Elvis and Joe. An awful lot of people like Elvis and Joe. Part of me is a little afraid that if a film were made of them, and by the way, even a good film, not necessarily a dog, but even a good film, that then whoever those actors are, maybe as readers, you guys are gonna, when you read my books, you're gonna picture a different person. I'd rather you picture your person.
Yeah.
So that's why I stay away from films.
If you wrote another standalone, would you sell that?
Yeah, standalones I feel different about.
Because it's too much of there's too much at stake almost. This kind of goes in with Elvis and Joe.
Yeah.
You sell the rights to one, they all go.
They all go.
Standalones, you'd be willing to roll the dice.
And have in the past. The 3 standalones that I've written, Demolition Angel, Hostage, and the 2 Minute Rule, I've happily sold or optioned film rights to those. Hostage, Hostage was turned into a film with Bruce Willis. Demolition Angel, film rights sold immediately to Columbia TriStar. They still have it. They'll never be a movie, but they own it. They paid me. So I do feel differently about the standalones. Part of that is they're standalones. Elvis and Joe are my life's work. When I'm dead, if any of my books, it's going to be Elvis and Joe that people remember, hopefully read at least for a couple of months after I'm gone. But those guys, they're the horse that got me here, so I want to take care of them and make sure they're fed and watered.
Do you have actors that if you were to sell
You weren't paying attention, were you? Do I have actors who, if I were going to sell the film rights to, who I think would make a good Elvis and Joe? No. Do you?
only for Joe?
Who? Steven Seagal for Joe Pike. You know what? Here's a funny thing. See what happens? That's what it's like to be me. Well, I find this an odd psychological thing about me. I've never seen Elvis and Joe's face. I could not tell you in detail what Elvis's face looks like, or Joe's. I mean, like when I'm describing Joe, you know, I got the sunglasses, I got that he has no emotion on his face, there's the short brown hair, there's that stuff. But to actually see, like the shape of his nose, the shape of his lips, cheekbones, I've never seen them. And in keeping with the oddity of this, when I'm in my head and I'm seeing the scenes that I write, because I actually visualize them, I see them. I tend to see them from the ground up, almost as if invariably the camera's way down low. And if it's Elvis and Joe, like I can see, you know, Joe's running shoes in perfect clarity, you know, and Elvis's Keds or whatever he's wearing. It's all sharp and clear. But then as the camera rises, it starts to fuzz and gray out. By the time I get up here, all I see is an outline.
Yes.
Is there any current TV show that you like?
Current TV show that I like, Walking Dead. Like that. Justified. Like that. That's about it. No, I watch a couple other things, but I'm just drawing a blank.
Yes.
Would you ever appear in a television show like Michael Connelly and Stephen Cannell did?
Would I ever appear
Yes.
like on Castle in the card game if they asked me? They haven't asked me, but sure.
Do you have an offer you wanted to make?
Should be right in.
There you go, in the back.
Am I going to give Elvis a tattoo? No. That's diluting the brand.
Well, let's give a hand to